The snow was coming down harder than the forecast promised, thick and relentless, the kind that erased road lines and second chances alike. When a dark sedan slowed on a deserted stretch of highway outside a quiet Midwestern town, a barefoot woman in a torn white dress stood under a flickering streetlight, her hair soaked, her hands shaking, mud staining the hem like proof of a life unraveling in real time. In the driver's seat was a man whose eyes had grown tired long before the night fell. A single father who had learned how quickly ordinary evenings could turn into moments that decided who you really were. If this were you, exhausted, broke, responsible for a child sleeping at home, would you stop? Or would you tell yourself that someone else would help her instead? Michael Turner had not planned on being out that late. His 8-year-old son was at home with a neighbor, and the guilt of it sat heavy in his chest as he drove back from a double shift at a distribution warehouse. Life had shrunk into routines of survival after his wife died 3 years earlier, leaving him with a mortgage, hospital bills, and a boy who still checked the door every night hoping his mother would walk back in. Michael had learned to keep moving, to not ask why, to not look too closely at pain that could swallow him whole. Yet when he saw the woman on the roadside, something in him broke through the exhaustion, a quiet voice that reminded him of the night he himself had stood helpless in a hospital hallway, praying for mercy that never came. The woman's name was Rachel Morgan, though Michael would not learn that until much later. In that moment, she was simply someone clearly running from something larger than the storm. She had fled her wedding hours earlier, escaping a cathedral filled with power, wealth, and expectations that suffocated her more than the cold ever could. She was supposed to become the wife of a billionaire heir whose name dominated financial headlines and charity galas, a man polished by privilege but hollow where warmth should have been. The dress she wore had cost more than Michael earned in a year, yet it hung on her like a mistake she could not undo. As she climbed into the car, shivering and silent, Michael felt the weight of a choice settle between them, one that neither of them had named but both understood. The drive that followed was quiet, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words. Snow brushed against the windshield like restless thoughts, and the town lights blurred into distant halos. Michael noticed how Rachel held herself together by sheer will, how her hands clenched fabric as if letting go would cause her to shatter. He thought about his son, about the promise he had made to always do the right thing even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. Rachel, in turn, watched the reflection of a man who had lost too much yet still chose kindness, and it confused her more than the luxury she had just abandoned. She had grown up believing that security came from money, from control, from appearances, but sitting in that worn car, she felt safer than she ever had in rooms filled with crystal chandeliers. Michael offered her a place to stay for the night, a modest home with mismatched furniture and a fridge that hummed louder than it should. Rachel hesitated, her entire life trained to distrust simplicity, but exhaustion won. In that small house, she saw photographs taped crookedly to the wall, a little boy's drawings on the refrigerator, and grief that had not yet learned how to leave. The next morning, she met Jacob, Michael's son, who offered her his favorite cereal without knowing why her eyes filled with tears. For the first time in years, Rachel was not being asked to perform, to smile, to be perfect. She was simply allowed to exist. News of her disappearance exploded across the country within days. Helicopters scanned highways, reporters speculated wildly, and security teams searched relentlessly. Rachel watched it all from Michael's living room, shame and fear tangling in her chest. She told him the truth then, not as a confession seeking forgiveness, but as a fact that could no longer be hidden. She expected him to recoil, to ask her to leave, to fear the chaos that followed her name. Instead, Michael listened the way a man listens when he has already lost the illusion of control over life. He understood that wealth did not protect you from loneliness, just as poverty did not erase dignity. Days turned into weeks. Rachel stayed, helping Jacob with homework, cooking dinners she was terrible at but proud of nonetheless, learning the rhythm of a life grounded in effort rather than excess. Michael found himself laughing again, startled by it, guilty for it, and then slowly grateful. They were not a love story written for headlines. They were two broken people learning how to breathe in the same space. Rachel confronted her past with courage, returning the ring, facing the fury and disbelief of a world that could not comprehend walking away from billions for peace of mind. Michael stood by her, not as a savior, but as someone who knew that sometimes survival meant disappointing everyone else. When the storm finally cleared, both literal and emotional, Rachel chose a quieter life, funding causes anonymously, working with children, finding purpose beyond status. Michael, with her support, found better work, stability, and the courage to believe that happiness was not a betrayal of his past. Their bond grew slowly, respectfully, rooted in shared nights of honesty and mornings of simple hope. They never pretended the scars were gone, only that they no longer defined them. Before this story ends, take a moment and tell us in the comments what you would have done if you were Michael that night on the highway, or Rachel standing in the snow with everything to lose. In the end, what stayed with them was not the wealth Rachel left behind or the struggles Michael endured, but the quiet truth that one small act of kindness can reroute an entire life. If this story stirred something in your heart, if it reminded you that compassion still matters in a hard world, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, not for us, but to keep stories like this alive for someone who might need them tonight.